Steve here. Just moving the computer back a little bit. Trying to get that feeling that we're not in each other's faces. In a few minutes, I'm going to continue with the reading out loud, reading of the book, Attuned, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World, by Thomas Hübl, rapidly becoming one of my favorite people ever. I mean, when a person's just achieved that state that you've had a consciousness of working towards, and then you come into contact with a person who's in that place that you've been working towards many, many lifetimes and haven't quite achieved. But you meet a person and you just know that this person is in that place that you want to be. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit. I'm going to put the book down for a minute and just going to talk for a minute. Maybe this will be part of this video, or maybe I'll just make a different video where I actually just read from the book. I recognized early on, or knew coming in, that if you wanted to learn something, it was best to hang out with someone who knew it already. So my dad knew some things, and I wanted to know what he knew. But I wasn't a good listener, or I asked too many questions or whatever. But the relationship I had with my father was frustrating to both of us. Equally frustrating, I would say. I asked too many questions. I didn't take the time to listen to the answer before I was asking other questions. And my dad was like, look, just go and play. I'm going to give you a job, like raking the lawn, whatever. So you have a choice, go play or wash windows. So I learned a lot from my dad. My co-housing unit mentioned to me how many times I've referenced what I've learned from my dad. So I learned a lot from him in spite of the fact that he was just wrong about so many things. Which just gave me in a consciousness of the stories that we live by. So we all live by these stories. We've all made up these stories, and we've lived by these stories. So I had so many amazing teachers that I wanted to learn something. I found a teacher, I learned it. I wanted to learn something else, I found a teacher, I learned it, I learned it, I learned it, I learned it. There were just always teachers. That's kind of the joy of this, one of the joys of this life for me is finding teachers. So this morning, I had a wonderful conversation with my co-housing unit. I'm her co-housing unit. And I had this wonderful conversation where the space for the conversation opened, and the ability to listen more on my end, because she does listen well, and she can repeat back what you've said, and like my father pointed out the discrepancies in your talk and your walk, which is great. It's great to have a life partner who's willing to do that with you for 19, 20 years. But we had one of those conversations where you could just feel the limitations we place on what we're comfortable about talking about dissolve, and then went out a little further And then it dissolved and went out a little further and went out a little further. And pretty soon, it just felt like there was this open dialogue. It was lovely and uncomfortable at times, because when you get to that open dialogue, then sometimes things can be said that make you realize, oh yeah, maybe if it's even that's the way I was and I'm not anymore, or that's the way I am and I'm becoming different, whatever. We're all in the process of change. But it felt really different. That's what I'll say. Felt like my relationship of over 20 years, so probably 30 years, kind of as life partners, 20 years, but as people knowing each other, whatever, 28 years. Good long time. That's gone by way too fast. Then I had an experience today. So on Tuesday mornings, I go over to the food bank garden, and mostly I bag up veggies. I bag up lettuces and snap peas and different herbs, and I put them in bags for the food bank, where people the majority of people who are having trouble affording food can get food. And it's supported by donations. All of it's supported by donations. It's lovely. The gardens have gotten so huge. I took 4 years off from working in the gardens during the pandemic, because I didn't like the consciousness. I didn't like being around everything being out of fear. And I felt personally like that was just a creation of the powers that be to achieve some end, and you can get people to do things when you make them afraid enough. We all make poor decisions when we're afraid. Like, oh, this will solve it. I'll just yell at this person or whatever, Anyway, I didn't want to be around it, so I stopped working in the garden, left the Garden of Eden, and went out in my polarized state. I'm like, no, there's a bunch of hooey, and no, we're all going to die. It's like, that's hooey, we're going to die. That's hooey, we're going to die. Blah! And it's just like two opinions. We're all going to die. It's true. When? It's a matter of when you get there. But people are afraid of it. They're afraid of death. And so if you tell them, if you don't do this, you're going to die, then you're practicing medicine. Because that's basically the way that I've experienced it is, if you don't do this, you're going to die. Okay, I'll do it. We're just going to pump toxic chemicals through your system, and you might get an extra year, but you might not. It's like, I'll do it. I'll take that extra year. You might suffer that last year, but you're going to get an extra year. And somebody made that up. Maybe they took statistics and they say, well, the people who have done this have tended to live a year longer than people who don't do it. And I'm sure there's some that live a year less than the people who don't do it. Whatever. It's all made up. That's what I'm saying. It's all made up. And so this morning I experienced working with a person bagging vegetables who 6 years ago, when I was working in the garden, I made up a story about this person, and I didn't like him. And oftentimes we'll do that. We'll make up a story about a person and we'll say, I don't like them. And then we lock into that. lock into the story we've made up, lock into the feelings around the story, live with it. And so here I was, right across the table, buried in groceries. But I was a different person. I was especially different after the conversation this morning. I felt like I was safer, that I had become safer. And then I kind of asked some questions and got some history and got to know the person across the table from me. And really, really liked them. And really felt like this is me in another body. And I think that's what we're moving to. We're moving to this is me in another body. We're just cells in a large organism called humanity. And we each have our little parts to play. But when we all work together, the whole organism works better. I think I'm just going to carry on. I'm going to go to there and find out if that's what Thomas talks about today. Because I feel like I'm tuning into the consciousness of Thomas. I'm moving into the spaciousness of the consciousness of Thomas Hübl. And I have told a number of people I've found the master teacher. Like I've had teachers every lifetime. Every lifetime I've sought out teachers because I've had an awareness of where I wanted to be in consciousness, and I've found the people that helped me to get there. And I feel like I'm getting really close to the place. And I feel like Thomas Hübl is in the place that I'm close to. It's going to get interesting. It is interesting. It's going to get more interesting. So this part of the chapter is called The Restoration of Aftertime. And that noise in the background is the playing of Bastet, the cat, the Egyptian cat Bastet, who wears a French beret. Egyptian with a French beret. She's a multi-national cat. Came from Chicago, moved out here from Chicago. Yeah, she likes it here. Okay, the restoration of aftertime. If you had a disagreement with your partner over breakfast, you will feel less present in your work until you've had an opportunity to sit and digest the experience. On your drive to the office and throughout the day, you'll likely replay moments from the morning's conflict in your mind. You may feel distracted, disconnected, or even anxious. You're still carrying undigested information from the morning as if your server were too overloaded to process it in time as it happened. I refer to this state as aftertime. In aftertime, it's as if the contents of the morning's conflict are bags of luggage you must drag with you everywhere. Everywhere you go until you can sort their contents. If half of you is consumed with those bags, you can't be fully present. You are half in the past. But this is about much more than simple disagreements over toast and coffee. Any one person may be delayed substantially in aftertime and is therefore incapable of full presence due to personal traumas that have not been resolved. In the same way, communities and societies that carry significant unresolved cultural wounds are likewise fractured in aftertime, keeping us busy for generations. Aftertime is past energy that has not been fully lived or digested and continues to impede presence today. So the inverse of aftertime is presence. Unintegrated history is past. Integrated history is presence. Each human soul is an expression of energy moving along a path of vertical and horizontal development. Yet every human soul is born into interpenetrating fields of ancestral and collective trauma. I'm going to read it again because I just went mentally distracted while I read it, so I'm just going to go back to it. I'm going to start at the beginning of the paragraph. It's just 2 sentences I'm going back to. Each human soul is an expression of energy moving along a path of vertical and horizontal development. Yet, every human soul is born into interpenetrating fields of ancestral and collective trauma. The human matrix, or collective field, contains so much instability, dissonance, and alienation that we have all in some way been imprinted by these tensions. This too is aftertime. And perhaps the greatest consequence of this disequilibrium is the persistent phenomenon of separation. In aftertime, not only do we feel separate from one another, we feel estranged from our own souls. And this is why I love this person. Few tears coming, because I'm feeling it. This is what Thomas and I refer to as embodying our experience. In aftertime, not only do we feel separate from one another, we feel estranged from our own souls and from our source. Moreover, we feel divided in time. Part of us is absorbed in the repetitional past, while another part obsesses over an artificial future. Yet it is only in the fullness of presence that we are, it's a strange sentence. It's only in the fullness of presence that are we liberated. I would have put it, we are liberated, but are we liberated is what it's written, so I'm going to just read it that way. In presence, we feel greater attunement with the body. We experience a sense of flow, of lightness. We become clear, more awake, more connected. With presence, there is more space, more movement, more illumination. With presence, we restore the past and realign ourselves in space and time. When someone you know becomes triggered by past trauma, you can learn to feel into the intelligence of their nerve system with your own. In essence, you can consciously employ the social engagement system to help you both observe and connect with another's pain and perhaps even assist in its healing. When a friend, co-worker, or therapeutic client becomes suddenly and inappropriately fearful, hostile, withdrawn, or suppressed, you can quietly lean in and notice. Ah, a hurting 4-year-old child is suddenly present in their energy. Some psychologists refer to this as regression, but the presence of this 4-year-old child is pointing to the place in time. That was painful cat claws in my leg. She jumped up. But the presence of this 4-year-old child is pointing to the place in time at which the original trauma occurred. The frightening, undigested experience of the 4-year-old has been held apart in a separate time zone from the active self. And like a futuristic time traveler, you can locate it. As you do, you begin to notice that this 4-year-old aspect has stepped forward so that some of the undigested pain it once experienced may be witnessed and met with safety and reassurance. In fact, what we think of as destiny is in truth the unassimilated past. Trauma never stays buried. Whatever has been left unresolved will recapitulate. It was philosopher George Santayana who first said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Those who cannot fully digest and integrate the past will re-experience it again and again." Until the shards of trauma have been restored to wholeness, the past just recycles. The Eastern mystical tradition referred to this process as karma, from the Sanskrit for effect or fate. Yet by bridging contemporary scientific understanding with ancient wisdom, we see that karma is the residual energy of unprocessed suffering. It's good to feel. It's good to change. In my night school that I've been attending over the past 13 years in the dream world, I was told 4 years ago, June of 2020, that there were 3 ways to change. You could change your beliefs by noticing when you were triggered and separating the story from the emotion. And when you got the emotion separated far enough from the story, arm's length away, they disattached. And you could let go of the emotion. And then you could let go of the story. So that's one way to change, is by releasing the emotions of your beliefs. And they taught me in the dream world that the beliefs were basically unresolved events from the past. The other ways to change was your habits. And your habits tended to be ways of doing things to avoid experiencing things that might trigger you, bring your beliefs up. And in order to change habits, all you had to do was do it differently. Instead of use your right hand, use your left hand, and it breaks the habit. And then the third was that you could change your boundaries. You could develop boundaries if you were letting people's energies come in. And I mean, even though you could see that as good too. But initially, just hold your boundaries with someone like, this is who I am, and this is who you are, and you are who you are, and I who I am, and it's okay. And to just create those boundaries, it just helped you to feel like you weren't being invaded by other people's ideas about you. So that was one of the things that I had developed really well. But Thomas is now suggesting that I just open it up and enfold the world. Basically, in his videos that I've been watching on YouTube, he's talking about enfolding everything. Just enfold it all. And it's like, okay, I've been doing that on some levels since the end of January of 2020, when my guides asked me to set up a world healing field. So I've been working with these healing fields for individuals, and then it got to be for individuals plus any soul that was also affected by the event we were going back to. So I was holding a bigger field. And then in the end of 2020, they asked me to set up a field for the planet. A healing field to ground the disturbance that would be arising on the planet. It was difficult. I don't even want to go into it. It was difficult. It was much more feelings than I had learned to feel in individual sessions or even in group sessions. It was an expansion that took me a while to learn to work with it without feeling like I was going to die from that intensity of energy. But I learned to do it. And now I'm so good at it. I do it. I've been doing it for 4 years. I've had literally maybe 10 days off in the 4 years, 4.5 years that I've been doing this. It was difficult. I don't regret a moment. It's training. Because all of us are clearing our stuff. And I've told you that we're down to 9 months for the birth of ourselves as a brand new being. Maybe it's the same being, but actually fully present. On March 23rd of 2025, we will have completed 28 years of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual cleansing. 9 months is not much in a 28-year cycle. But I'm so pleased to be a person on the planet that can talk about these things, can talk about the changes that I'm noticing happening, because we're all noticing changes happening. We're all noticing that the world we lived in is gone, and now we need to live in a new world. And by clearing more and more of our stuff, we're going to end up March 23rd, 2025, in a new world. I look forward to it. I support everything that you do. And as Thomas was saying, it's time to just enfold the whole space and become the one. Become the one that can hold the space for change. And it really can just be one, because on many levels, we are one. So it only takes one of us. I'm all in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being present. Now let's go.